All right, so the sun is about to come up, and I'm getting the sandbag out of the truck. The weight is at 251 pounds. I'd already warmed up before doing this, and I'm about to show you the full session, or at least the volume, of sandbag bear hug carries that are about to go down. The workout is set to a 60-minute running clock to do as many down and back bear hug carries as possible, picking the bag off the tailgate of my truck. I'm also pairing that with kettlebell front rack carries each arm and banded face pulls off my trailer hitch. Starting this one off with a warm-up carry set at 251 pounds. This is a farther distance than what will be in the actual workout because I'm about to add 11 pounds to the bag to make it 262 pounds, and I'll show that as well. So for the bands, depending on the session, I try to relate the exercise to what the workout is related to. Sometimes I do the opposite. It just depends on what I'm feeling that day, really. Like in this one, I think banded face pulls complement this one well, as it's heavy upper back and trap work doing these bear hug carries. I never do a burnout set on these in between sets, just to avoid fatiguing quickly. Just steady, consistent sets the entire time. All I'm doing is just strengthening my joints to handle weight like this with these bands, and also use them for recovery and blood flow when I'm not training, just to speed that up and roll into each week as fresh as I can be. As for the front rack carries, I'm just building muscle density and the stabilizers in each shoulder. I always carry these farther, obviously, because it's a lighter weight that tends to isolate smaller muscles in a way. And it also has a similar effect on the obliques and core as a sandbag shoulder carry. So I've seen others do bear hug and other sandbag carries in general at a fast pace. I've even seen people run with a heavy sandbag. Can't say I've ever done that. I've always gone at a slow to moderate pace, I guess, because I like to feel every bit of torture and every step of it. I've grown to prefer the way I do it, but I can't say I won't try running with a heavy sandbag one day. It's kind of similar to running while wearing a heavy rucksack. Sprinting out of necessity is one thing, but running with weight on your back seems like a cocktail for injury. Back when I was a noob at rucking, I tried doing that with an 80-pound ruck. I tripped, face planted, and hit my head on the pavement and got hit in the head by the iron plates in the backpack. May have got a concussion. So I guess the risk to reward ratio isn't enough to convince me. I believe there's other and safer ways to build strength and endurance and stamina without high risks like that. But to each their own, that's just my opinion on it. So as you can see here, I'm filling the sandbag up with about 11 pounds of sand or dirt or whatever. And I don't really have an easy way to do this. I kind of got to like pour it in that little chute right there and shake the bag out and get it to disperse evenly within the bag. All right, first set, bear hug carries at 262 pounds. So this spot is actually a vacant warehouse or logistics center, so there's a lot of room for activities here. I've got my truck parked in a parking space for a semi-truck or lorry for my friends in the UK, so it's very long and great for things like this. I'm a bit out of my routine here. I usually train before the sun comes up and once in the evening during the week. Work has been pushed back to 10 a.m., so I decided to train at sunrise. If I could train anytime I wanted, it would be at sunrise, before it gets hot, especially during the summer. If you've watched any of my other videos, you'll notice that I train barefoot a lot. I'm a huge advocate for training barefoot. I think it's been great in strengthening the feet, the mobility, and athleticism. But there are times and places to wear shoes and be barefoot. Doing heavy carries like this on pavement, I wear shoes for support. Plus, I want to keep my foot pain at a minimum for this. I actually deal with foot pain a lot. Being barefoot on a tile floor, doing chores around my house, it literally breaks my feet. I could literally ruck 20 miles and do a bunch of sandbag carries, and my feet won't feel near as bad as they do when I'm at home doing chores for about an hour. It's crazy how that works. I'm constantly rolling my feet out on a ball on the weekends when I'm not training because of that. So this workout is part of a heavy sandbag carry cycle. I just added weight from what I was doing for 2 weeks. I'm getting into the heavier side of it though, so I've made some changes. I've always been a big believer in accessing the sandbag off the ground for every exercise, but being in this heavier stretch, in order to focus on the carries themselves, I access the sandbag from an elevated position for both shoulder carries and bear hug carries. You can spend a ton of wasted energy getting the bag into position rather than actually doing the exercise you intended to do. So sometimes it's necessary to modify something in order to focus on certain moves, especially with carries. And I've noticed people think I train at crazy volumes all the time with the heavy sandbag, but it's really just from adaptation. I don't really train as intense as it looks in some of my shorts. I train steady, and I don't stop and rest for long. I guess that's how the farm strength is built, not pushing intensely until failure, but finding that steady pace and hanging in there the entire time. Over time, the body will adapt to handle the volume and the weight. Otherwise, you'll keep hitting a wall, I've found. So straight up, when I first got this big sandbag and started doing bear hug carries with these, they were absolutely terrible, borderline unbearable, probably after carrying it for 15 feet. It felt like an elephant crushing my chest. So if you're watching this and you're struggling, I just want to reassure that it's hard for everybody. We may make stuff like this look easy, but it's still quite demanding and agonizing, as you can tell by some of my facial expressions here. I've been training with this sandbag at many different weights from 200 to 300 pounds over a year, and I still think it feels like an elephant crushing my chest. The only difference from now and then, not only does the body as in the core, the upper back, and the glutes and legs adapt, you can also find ways to adapt with the way you hold and carry it as well. I've found leaning slightly back, holding it in position, takes any pressure off the lower back, and it's always best to keep the bag high enough so when you take steps, it obviously doesn't get in the way. Leaning forward, I feel, would be terrible for the lower back. So in the past few weeks, I've talked about how my sandbag is wider at the top than the bottom, and how I've shown and tinkered with picking, shouldering, and carrying it upside down. I didn't do any of that this session. I might mix it in the coming weeks. And I also was doing box squats with this, but I've just decided to really dial down carrying to finish the cycle strong. Box squats for heavy reps and high reps are definitely something I want to pursue in the future, though. So the object of this session is to not let the sandbag touch the ground. 1, because I don't feel like picking it up and wasting energy. And 2, because picking sandbags up, especially digging under the bag, can hurt a little bit. Because I learned early on that the weight can crush your hands, especially on concrete and paved surfaces like this. I found it's best to have some kind of padding under the bag, whether it's grass, a padded surface, or a piece of padding on pavement like this. So volume. So in this session, I did 10 sets of down and back carries with the front rack carries and banded face pulls, all in 45 minutes. I've always been one to train at higher volumes as in number of sets with a heavy sandbag. The kicker about sandbags is, especially running a one sandbag operation, is that whatever weight you have in the bag, whether it's 200 or 250 pounds, it's there and heavy from start to finish. There's no light way to warm up for the moves. When you build adaptation to lift a heavy sandbag at higher volumes, lifting at one time, whether it's shouldering or carrying, isn't going to take much out of the tank. In other words, if I'm moving the heavy sandbag from my garage to my truck, like because I just filled it maybe, I don't know, I can lift it, carry it once without warming up, and will hardly be taxed by it. I definitely recommend warming up before a training session with a lot of volume. But then again, I look at it like this. If I have to lift and carry a person for whatever reason to get them away from a dangerous situation, am I going to warm up? Probably not. I know that's an extreme case scenario, not really something we see every day, unless you're a first responder, of course, but things can happen pretty quick, especially when you least expect it. So I could say the benefit of training and adapting to higher volume with a heavy sandbag is the ability to perform an awkward heavy lift once at any moment while having much more in the tank. I usually cap the volume after I start feeling fatigued and where rest times need to be longer. I could probably do more, but I also want to keep training heavy as long as possible without having to do a deload, or just simply hit a plateau. Over time, like any other heavy stimulus, sandbags will wear out the nervous system, and I try to avoid that as long as I can. I'd say high volume, consistently, may work better than just pushing until failure every day. That's just the way I train, and it's seemed to keep me from plateauing so far. So at this point, in set 9, I sped up on the carry back here. I was feeling quite fatigued, and at that point of, I only got one more set, come on, let's go. If you noticed in the previous sets, I unlocked my hands and just placed them on the bag itself. Locking your hands together can tax the grip pretty hard after a while. I balled my fist up and went hands-free on the 9th set. I will say doing that and really any other grip with a solid sandbag on bear hug carries will build a ton of crush strength. Only training to crush a person with love by giving hugs. Overall, this session was just part of the routine. If you're still watching at this point, I appreciate you taking the time to watch and listen to me ramble on about sandbags. If you have any questions, anything to add, leave it in the comments. And as always, thanks for being here and keep putting in the work.